Hello and welcome to this episode of Startup Central. I'm Nayantara. This is the only show of its kind on Indian television dedicated, of course, to startups, innovation, technology. Basically, anything to do with the new economy, it's going to be here on your favorite channel, ET Now, every weekday at sharp 6 p.m. Like all the stakeholders of this community that we get on the show, the team that puts the show together, the Startup Central team, thrives on constructive criticism. So keep writing into us to tell us how to improve every single day. Our email address right on top, suc@etnow.tv. Is this the season of markdowns and layoffs? If you look at it in the last couple of days and weeks, this is how it's going. Unacademy has laid off nearly 1,000 people. Trell, which is looking at a business failure, has almost laid off 300 people. Furlenco, which is in the business of renting furniture, etc., has laid off 180 people. Lido, once again being seen as a business failure, 150 employees. Meesho, which is backed by marquee investors and has them at the cap table, has laid off 150. OK Cred, about 40. This for different reasons, from business failure to being agile to pivoting to a new business model, to many other reasons. The question is this the new trend for the startup ecosystem? Remember, we've been talking about how there is almost a quarter of a lag between the public markets and the private markets. Have the private markets finally caught up after the record fundraising, the record number of unicorns being minted? Do we need to gear up for bad times? Or are these just a couple of examples and we need to go beyond that? Joining me to talk about this hot topic now is K Ganesh as well as Siddharth Pai. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of Startup Central. K Ganesh, I'll come to you first. We saw the best of times. Do we now need to get ready for the worst of times?
I think this issue about some companies, especially unicorns, laying off people is being over sensationalized. So if you look at, in reality, these are few companies that are laying off a small fraction of the total people that they have employed. If you look at the boom that we have had, if you look at the new employment generation the startup sector has created, it is phenomenal. While this makes the headlines, it is a small fraction. And what really is the alternative? The traditional sectors are not employing more people. There is degrowth in employment there. The new age companies, startup sectors are the net employers by a huge margin. Now, when this happens, it is but natural that some of the business models don't work out. Startups always raise money based on future, what they are going to do, what growth they are going to achieve. When that plan does not play out exactly like that, some of the verticals, some of the business models will have to be shut down. So the people who are employed in those sections will get laid off, may get alternative employment within the company or outside the company, but there is absolutely no reason to panic, feel down, or this. Look at the numbers. In 2015, we had 8 unicorns. In 2021, we have 81 unicorns. We have the total venture capital raise in 2015 was $1.5 billion. Last year, we raised $36 billion. So literally, we are talking about from 5,000 startups in 2015, we have gone up to 60,000. It's a 10x growth in startup sector, huge employment creation. When that kind of growth happens, some sectors, some companies, some verticals, some model, some unemployment, minuscule fraction, too much of sensationalism, nothing to read into it. Oh my God, this is a bubble. Oh my God, this is a sign of things to come. Lot more people will shut down. Lot more people will get laid off. The answer is yes, but still a very small fraction of the new employment that will get generated. I'm very bullish.
You're basically saying it's not all gloom and doom and don't talk yourself into a recession. But Mr. Ganesh, a lot of things have changed, right? We had a funding boom in the last 2 years. And I want to take this question to you before going to Sid Pai. We've had a funding boom. We saw the kind of money that came in, the number of unicorns that were minted. While you're saying this is a small fraction, the fact is there has been a change on ground. If term sheets were getting signed in 48 hours, If there was FOMO, fear of missing out, it's slowly turning to JOMO, joy of missing out. There's more, as there must be, more emphasis being paid on due diligence. We've seen, for example, how Tiger Global's portfolio has taken a big hit. That news came out over the weekend. So basically, VC funding is going to slow down. So do the startups and founders really have a choice?
Yeah. So firstly, I have been in the startup sector for the last 32 years. I used to be as young and handsome and had as much hair as Siddharth Pai here. I lost it of 32 years of startup. So I have seen this cycle play out repeatedly. There is huge euphoria, lot of talking up, huge run up in valuations, and then deep depression, gloom and doom. Neither of the two extremes are really a reality. Okay, this cycle has played out multiple times, whether it is September 11, whether it is Lehman Brothers, whether it is .com boom or bust, all of that happens. Don't read too much into it. Yes, currently the valuations are suppressed. You are absolutely right. The term sheets don't get signed with the same speed as they were getting signed 6 months back. All of that is a reality. That's part of the cycle. It happens every 2 years. That does not in any way mean that total employment in that sector of startup, total money that's coming into the startup is going to go down anyway. The rate may slow down. Nobody wants to catch a falling knife. Therefore, people will take more time to decide. They will be more cautious, more flight to profitability. People will be more conservative. But this is a 2-year cycle that goes on and on. And believe me, in the same channel with the same people, 1 year later, we'll again talk about huge euphoria. So don't read the cycles too much into it and say that because of this is going to happen.
So Siddharth Pai, this is all cyclical, and K Ganesh's message to you is that you don't need to lose your hair worrying about markdowns, layoffs.
Oh, I'll keep that in mind. But see, I think the important thing to also realize in the startup sectors is a large amount of experimentation that actually ends up happening with it. Now, we actually look at the reason why some of these companies have actually let them go. We can broadly break it down into two categories. One, where the company's actually been under stress or the company is on the verge of shutting down for a variety of reasons. So there's been a business model failure. Two, there's been a pivot that the company's actually done where they realized some of the experiments they've actually ran haven't exactly panned out the way they actually wanted to, and they're concentrating more on their core business as opposed to some of the other verticals that they've actually forayed into. That being said, all the people who are actually being let go as of now, the absorption rate into the other startups is actually humongous. So we contrast this with about 15, 20 years ago when there was massive layoffs. All those people were essentially jobless for a substantial period of time. Whereas as of now, it happens something as informal as a WhatsApp group where a founder actually says, look, these are the kind of guys who are letting go. Here's a Google sheet with basically all the information about these guys, how well he's done, etc., etc. There are a large number of recruiters and even founders themselves are actually going towards it. Believe it or not, despite all this happening, it's extremely tough for very large companies to even find employees for that matter. Trying to get a coder in Bangalore as of now is extremely tough. It's easier to find a unicorn in Bangalore than it is to actually find a free coder or a free engineer in this particular city itself. We've actually reached that kind of situation. So there is going to be creative destruction. There would be some amount of layoffs. A large amount of this is also cyclical, as what Ganesh has also said. But if you actually look at the reabsorption rate that's actually happening over there, it's immensely high also. So that's something that also been taken into consideration. Experiments do happen. The ones that have succeeded have actually seen a large amount of hiring actually come up, which never actually gets covered anywhere in the media. It's always the gloom and doom kind of thing that actually ends up getting covered. So you need to take the good with the bad. The sustainable rate, once you actually take a step back and you look at the longer term growth about this, it's an extremely strong secular growth that we're seeing that's actually trending upwards with very, very few minor downsides that end up happening primarily because of extraneous reasons. And it's not indicated or restricted to the startup ecosystem alone. It's actually happened in the listed space, the unlisted space across various industries as well. So contextualizing this becomes important. And that actually gives you a much stronger trend line as to what's happening in the industry itself.
Okay. And K Ganesh is a very pertinent point that Sid Pai has made. We did see, right, when you have euphoria, it doesn't mean it has to be unrealistic. It doesn't mean that, you need to give new joinees BMW superbikes and pet insurance and the latest of gadgets and things like that. Because it's not sustainable.
Yeah. No, I think in some sectors, some skill set, we have seen that BMW phenomena play out. It is not across the board, across all. But the bottom line is, today the job market is very, very, very strong. Nobody need to be despondent or cry about the people who get laid off, because they get picked up very early. Most of these is at entry level, middle level, junior level, where there are huge opportunities. You must have heard of the great resignation debate. So the problem is not with the employees getting laid off. The problem is with startup founders, problems with the companies which just is not able to hire enough people. People are not available. So this is a good situation to be in for an employee. Minuscule people that get laid off will get more than one offer to be able to find. So there is no crisis here, right? And again, startup is something that is based on future. They raise money on future. The growth is on future. And when you plan that way, it is bound to happen that some of the models will fail. Some of the things won't work out. Many of the people will get redeployed, but some skill sets are such that they cannot be redeployed. They will get laid off. They will go to another company. So I have absolutely no fear that we are facing joblessness, unemployment, and a crisis staring at us. Definitely no. It is the other way around, like the great resignation debates and other challenges have shown. So we are in a very good place as far as startup and employment of people are concerned.
And the other thing to also keep in mind is some of these people who are also leaving right now do actually end up going and forming startups by themselves as part of that. We've often seen this happen even during the 2020s, when a large amount of layoffs actually happened. A majority of those people end up getting reabsorbed, or they actually went to start up businesses now that have already raised substantial amounts of cash. They're actually continuing that entire thing forward. So the creative destruction that actually underpins the entire startup ecosystem actually works in both ways. There's a resource is actually let go. The resource either ends up getting absorbed or actually goes on to create something more of value as part of that entire thing itself. And even some of the point that you made about the BMWs and the holidays in Dubai and all these other kind of things, a large amount of that is actually just savvy marketing. It creates
it's just a minuscule thing. I have not, in the last 32 years, despite my attractive appearance, I have not got any offer of even being sent to Nandi Hills. Forget about Dubai or anything like that, and not even a cycle. But more importantly, the joke is actually the other way around. They say that in Bangalore, in 100 Feet Road in Indiranagar, if you walk slightly aimlessly, you will either get funded or you will get a job offer. So you've been advised to walk with purpose and not roam around a bit, because you will get either funding or job offer in Bangalore. So I think I don't think there's a problem on that count.
That being said, Nayantara, see, the important realization that founders are even having right about now is this sort of boom and bust hiring and firing cycle is not actually sustainable. And founders also now have taken that deeply into cognizance, wherein they're actually being a lot more mature and tailored about the kind of hiring that they actually do, and they make sure they don't actually end up hiring more than actually what they end up requiring. If you remember, even in 2015, 2016, there was a huge issue that happened. If you compare the flux the ecosystem went a while ago versus the flux it's actually going through now, it's actually a handful of companies who are quite articulate and cognizant of the fact that some of these were actually experiments that they were doing, and some of them actually had to end up being let go as part of that itself. And when an employee gets let go in a startup now, it's always a founder who takes it upon himself, founder, senior management, to take it upon themselves to actually reach out to investors, reach out to fellow co-founders and other startups to actually try to find a place for these particular employees also. They make sure that there's a transition plan that's also being built out. If you compare this with you would have seen the movies in the 80s and 90s, and people were fired, the doors is just shut and nothing actually end up happening. Now there's actually a process that's come in. There's maturity that's been built into the cycle now. And even over time, we'll actually see this entire thing end up actually ebbing to some extent. There will, of course, be one or two startups who suddenly emerge there. They raise 100 million, they'll hire 1,000 people. 12 months later, they end up firing 800 people. These sort of exceptions, once you actually contextualize this in the total number of startups that are actually raising funding and actually continuing, it's always going to be a slight exception that will actually, unfortunately, end up.
It's a very small fraction. And the other thing that has also happened is that if you look at it, both like Siddharth mentioned, many of them can do startups. They end up doing their own startup or becoming core promoters or co-founders or part of the core team. The second is the gig economy. Okay, right? The gig economy allows startups and founders to hire people on part-time basis, on contractual basis, which is great for everybody. Then this concept of stigma associated with hiring and firing does not apply. So many of the times you actually get into contractual gig economy kind of worker, which is time sliced.
Oh, yes, we are, of course, seeing the gig economy explode, and that is there. But my final question, and whichever one of you two want to take it, or both of you. Now, in the run up to this event, where we've seen, unicorns backed by the likes from SoftBank to Tiger Global to Sequoia Capital announce these kind of layoffs and undertake them, while they might be agile and pivoting and reducing redundancies, the fact is both of you and every expert has said that the private markets lag the public markets usually by a couple of months, right? We started to see the comeback in the public market. So I'm only assuming the worst is still to come for private markets. It may not be as bad, it may not be all gloom and doom, but is this going to be the season of more layoffs and more markdowns? Because there are many who will be in colleges, in engineering institutes, maybe mid-career as well, who've decided to move to the startup world.
Nayantara, I think, the public markets always lead the private markets by about a quarter. So if we actually take the same analogy right about now, we are actually seeing this sort of resurgence actually come back. So this particular quarter may end up being a slightly hairy quarter for a number of folks as part of that, because it's rationality that's actually seeping back in as of now. Everyone knows the large amount of exuberance that underpinned 2020 and 2021 was actually an exception, and that wasn't actually the norm. So as the exception actually ends up ebbing to a large extent and rationality ends up actually coming in, the same kind of strong growth that we end up seeing over the past few years will actually end up continuing as part of that. And in the startup world, 1 quarter is not the largest amount of time. For all the people who are actually on the fence right about now, the sheer amount of dry powder that VCs and private equity investors have actually ended up raising in 2020, 2021 has to actually be meaningfully deployed somewhere. So people don't mind taking a quarter just for things to actually cool off, everything to come back. But that's actually the best time to start building. Google was actually built during a recession. Most of Flipkart was actually built after the aftermath of 2008. The best companies always come in the moment there's actually been some sort of dip in the market, because that's at the point in time where everyone actually looks to people for optimism. And an entrepreneur is anything if not actually optimistic when it comes to this. So we are seeing people, and even the people in CXOs, mid-40s, early 20s, and their teenagers, and basically anyone in between, or even slightly older for that matter. The best time to actually start off is actually now. And the quicker they actually do, the faster they end up moving. The ability to attract talent right about now is huge. The ability to attract capital and sensitize investors to your kind of business model and your approach is actually at an all-time high. So all investors know this for a fact. Founders also know this for a fact. And the industry will actually continue to absorb this. Industry will continue to compound the way it has been doing over time itself.
So, Mr. Ganesh, you've seen 32 years of experience with this. I'll give you the final question. With the factors in those 32 years, you've never seen this kind of funding, this kind of enthusiasm from VCs. This is not pressure from VCs to start declaring profits, trim the fat, increase the cash runway, get serious about profitability.
Yeah. No, so obviously this entire sector, the valuations, all has been going up and up. So 32 years, I have not seen this kind of levels of euphoria. But what I have seen is multiple cycles of ups and downs. And I do very strongly believe the shorter the cycles of up and down, the quicker the correction of euphoria into normalcy and doom and gloom, and then again coming up, the better it is for everyone. Because if you keep on going up and up, your fall will be that much sharper. We are seeing only that. Obviously, the base levels of valuation, levels of funding, levels of money being spent, levels of employment being absorbed in the startup sector has continuously been increasing, which is good news for everybody. Shorter correction cycles are best for the system to absorb the shock. Otherwise, the falls will be drastic. I do agree with you that in terms of temperance of valuation, time taken to close term sheets and funding, right now we are at a stage where it is slower than what it was 6 months back. It may remain so for another quarter or 2 quarters, but again you will see the same euphoria and all of that will happen. Because now the public markets have come in, they have started participating. That's a big structural change. Startup exits through IPOs was non-existent earlier. In India, exits was a major challenge because M&As were rare. But now that public market has opened, even though right now it has softened, hopefully after the LIC IPO, again it will come up. We are already hearing that it's coming up. That is very good news. So those are structural changes over 32 years that has taken place. That in India, you can start a company even before it makes profit. If it says good growth and model, you can list it in India. And that is a form of monetization and liquidity event is great news. So all in all, very good progress in the 30 years.
Okay, so let's see what's in store for us going forward. There are many reasons why each of those startups, from an Unacademy to a Meesho to a Lido to a Trell to others that have announced these layoffs, it's from redundancies to pivoting to a failed business model to increasing cash runway. There is no one answer, but it's a story. It is a new trend, and we're right on top of it.